You're listening to Melanated Rising, Episode 1. On this show, we inspire, uplift, and ignite Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color creatives and athletes. Here, we have open and honest conversations on topics and issues affecting us as people of color, as creatives of color, and how to take what limits us and turn it into what ignites us and our creative work. Every episode is an exploration into what is possible when Black and Brown creatives stand in our undeniable power. I'm your host, Kristen Iris.
I'm Layla Saad.
Welcome to Melanated Rising. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Today, I am joined by guest host Leila Saad, who is amazing. To tell you a little bit about her, Leila Saad is a Black feminist writer and speaker whose work focuses on centering the stories, art, and magic of people of color. Leila's work explores the intersecting themes of race, spirituality, feminism, and leadership. As an East African, Arab, British, Muslim, feminist soul seeker living in the Middle East, she's in Qatar, and sharing her work with the global community, Leila stands at a diverse intersection of identities from which she is able to draw rich and intriguing perspectives. Leila's own personal journey as a Black Muslim woman, her work with her clients, and her writings often confront the oppressive cultures of patriarchy and white supremacy. Leila is currently writing her first book, From Anger with Love, a Black feminist talks to spiritual white women about white supremacy. Thank you so much for joining me, Leila. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I am excited for this conversation.
Yes, and what this conversation is about, we're talking about anger, which is so in line with your book. That's why I was like, oh, she would be perfect for this. And anger as people of color, and I think especially as Black women, because we are both Black women, and how that anger can be used in creativity and also how it is often used against us in this very white supremacist world that we have. So let's dive in. I think that anger is such an interesting topic. So what have been your experiences? We'll just kind of open it up. What are your feelings and your thoughts on anger since you are, writing this book, From Anger with Love?
Well, my personal experiences with anger have been about biting my anger, holding back my anger. That was how I was raised and conditioned into society. And I think most women are. We're taught to swallow our anger. We're taught to be nice, not make a scene, not make a fuss, don't be dramatic. And so I spent most of my life really internalizing that anger. Instead of channeling it, instead of speaking that truth, it was always internalized. It made me quite sick many times. But it was when I wrote the now viral post, I Need to Talk to Spiritual White Women about white supremacy, that I fully let that anger move through me, because the message, what I needed to convey through that needed anger to be there. There was no easy way to say, hey, you know what, spiritual white women, you're being hypocrites right now. You're talking about us, all women, but when it comes to issues around women of color, Indigenous women, Black women, you're silent. We don't hear anything from you. And so there was no way for me to talk about that without anger being present, because anger is the most appropriate response to racism. And so I have now been on this journey ever since writing that letter of learning how to be with my anger, learning both how to channel it and use it in my work, but also, learning how to use it, learning how white supremacy will mischaracterize my anger and use it against me as a trope of the angry Black woman. But also I've been learning how to be in relationship with anger where it doesn't burn me out, where it doesn't become unhealthy for me, where I'm not sacrificed through using my anger, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And so I've had similar experience in terms of not not really being allowed to have my anger.
Right.
And like you said, growing up, like, be nice, be the good girl. No, you're being so dramatic. And this is something that gets perpetuated through our society, not just from like family, upbringing, or people that raised us. Which I can't even think of specific instances where my parents necessarily taught me that. I don't know that it was them. It might have just been the world around me was like, your anger is not welcome. Women aren't allowed to be angry, but men are expected to be angry. Men are allowed to be angry, and they're allowed to express their anger in these like kind of combustible, destructive ways. And it's like, oh, well, that's how men are. That's the expectation, just like boys throwing tantrums. And we weren't like, as a woman, I feel like I wasn't really allowed to do that. And it came, it's funny. I feel like, as a child, I have these memories of like having this really, really intense, like, anger or like tantrums. And then like at one point it just stopped. And I asked my mom recently, I was like, how was I as a child? Like, did I have a temper? Was I really angry? Because I remember being really angry. And she's like, no, you weren't really angry. You were just really expressive. She's like, you were really emotive, like any little thing. And it was like, ah! And she's like, like, oh my God, like, let's not ever try to wake you up from a nap, because it was just like screaming, like, what are you doing this to me? Like, and I think that's what I was remembering now as an adult, is like, I'd be like, why are you waking me up? Like, I was asleep. Napping's my favorite time. But at some point it just like, it stopped. Like, I wasn't allowed to be like that. I felt like I wasn't allowed to express that. And this whole like niceness and be like a good girl and don't be dramatic, it is so dimming to who we actually are. And especially as people of color, for us, like you said, the most appropriate response to racism is anger. And that's healthy, and it gets turned against us. Now, I want to take it back to that letter that you wrote. Now, that was right after Charlottesville, right?
Yeah, it was the week of. It was just a couple of days afterwards. I had been planning to. I just recorded a podcast interview with a good friend of mine at the time, and that was what was due to go out. And then I messaged her, and I was like, "Look, I have some feelings right now, and I just really need to express them. So would it be okay if we just pause this episode so I can publish this, and then I'll publish your episode the week after?" That episode ended up never being published. Because of what happened with that letter. Took me on a whole other journey that I wasn't expecting to go on at all,
Yeah. So it's funny because we have interesting with timing with certain things, and like your journey and my journey and some of the changes that we made. Now, right after Charlottesville, I made a post. It was not like a long, it wasn't a letter like yours was. So like yours was more involved. I feel like you got more like probably more backlash.
It was the longest thing I'd ever written, like in one sitting. It was like, I have so much to say.
And you released it in 2 parts, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yes, I read it. I remember reading it and hear about that. And I think I had like recently started following you, but at that same time I had made 2 posts. But one of them, the first one, was really the one that kind of stirred some things up. And I had made a post about, if you are basically about white people, if you are saying that you don't see color, like that is not a good thing. That doesn't mean that you're not racist. That is your internalized racism talking. Because if you don't see my color, you don't see my struggle. You don't see my challenges. You don't see the things that I have to go through. You're sitting here living in your world and not paying attention to the problems that other people have. And somebody came on that post and said something along the lines of, well, I see you still have a chip on your shoulder. And I was like, what is, and at this time I was working with women, just like women in general. But honestly, a lot of my stuff was catered to white women because those are the online spaces I was in. The entrepreneurial groups were filled with white women. And so there was a little bit of like, I was a little apprehensive just even of writing that post. And she made that comment, and it was like a swarm of people came in and were like, are you kidding me? How can you say this? Like, what are you doing? And then she like, it was really bad. And all of like the kind of like weapons of violence that she could have used, that spiritual white women use, and like, oh, well, we're all the same, and all of those things were coming out. And well, let's have a conversation. And I'm like, you're not demanding my time. I don't owe you my time. But it was at that point that I was just, I think that was like the first point where I was like, I really feel like there's something off about what I'm doing and who I'm serving. And I need to be able to express these things that are making me angry, because we have a right to be angry. I need to be able to express this and to help the people who are also angry. And that's where I started to kind of realize that I wanted to work more with women of color, and maybe step away from working with white women, or focus more on women of color. And then that's transitioned. Now we're all, the only people I work with are people of color. And that was kind of a similar shift that I feel like you talked about having at that time as well. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I published that letter, I was like you. I'd been in the, those coaching spaces that were predominantly white. And so that ended up being who most of my clients were. I was running a membership group at the time, and it was like a monthly membership group. And it's really interesting because right before publishing that letter, I'd actually closed up the ability for people to sign up because I wanted to make some changes. And so that group was like maybe 20 people, right? Like I had a like small, steadily growing business. And I wrote this letter just because I just needed to say what I needed to say. Like I saw those images coming out of Charlottesville. I was reading the news stories, and it just, something inside me broke. Like it did something, and it was like a mask had been, just torn away from my eyes. And for maybe a year before that, I had already been slowly kind of learning, reading, like becoming more and more awake. But it was specifically seeing those images of those angry white men that terrified me. Every slave story I had read, every slave story I had seen, any KKK story, it was like I felt it in my body. And I was writing something recently for my book, and I said, I may not be African American, but I am a Black person, and every Black person knows that feeling, that fear of the enslavement, of the violence, of the abuse, right? Because of the color of your skin. You don't have to be African American to have that fear. And so, I saw that. I wrote the letter. I published it. I think I wrote it within a day, published it, and then everything exploded because suddenly thousands of people were sharing it, flocking to my site. Comments were just going off, like hundreds of comments coming through. I was not prepared. I was just running my little small business. I thought maybe like a few hundred people would read it and that would be it. And it ended up being eventually, and I don't even know the numbers anymore, hundreds of thousands though. The last time I checked, which was much closer to that time, it was hundreds of thousands.
I know I shared it.
Yes. Yeah. So I was really glad that I had closed off my membership program, because I would have just had hundreds of people coming in trying to sign up, thinking that this membership program was about racial justice, and it wasn't. It was about spirituality. Right? And so it was like I was focused on this, and then all of a sudden everyone was thinking that I was just focused on that. And so, I have this strong belief, I used to work as a business coach as well. And I have this strong belief like within me that when you're running your business has its own it has its own flow, and it has its own spirit and its own soul, and it will take you in the direction that you're supposed to be going. It works with your highest self, And so when I started Wild Mystic Woman, it started as a personal blog, just a personal project. And then it grew to, I want to do a podcast. And then it grew to a membership program. And then it grew to, let me write this article. And then suddenly, right? And then the journey of that. But yeah, I began to notice how I had not noticed how I was a minority in my own business. I had not noticed that.
Yeah.
And when I started to see the comments coming through from that post and realizing I'm in spaces where people think this, because there were some amazing positive comments, gratitude, all of that, but there was also some real violence and real racism, right? And a lot of like you said, why are you so angry? Why do you hate white people? Why have you got a chip on your shoulder? A lot of that, and it was like, I don't feel safe, right?
Yes.
I didn't realize that I have put myself in a position where I am surrounded by whiteness and I don't feel safe.
I felt the same way. Like in that moment, I was like, wow, like I have so many white connections in this, on Facebook, in this online space. I'm like, and I don't know who's actually going to stand for me and who's going to come after me for calling them out on their racism. And that didn't feel good for me. And I'm like, I don't know. Right. I don't know that I want to do this business in this way if I can't operate in a way where I can really speak my mind. Like I need to work with people where I can speak my mind and they're gonna get it.
And at that time, you'll remember, and you'll probably be able to see the difference between now and then in the way the majority of the white people that we are connected to is different, their outlook. At that time, it was like, oh, how can you say white people? How can you, how can you even call us white, right? Like, that's so racist. And, it was like, they were so hesitant. They were so unaware of the issues. They felt like they couldn't speak. They couldn't use their voice compared to now. There's much more of a willingness to have these conversations and to say, yes, I'm complicit. I don't know how, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm going to stay in the room. There's a big difference that I have noticed. But at that time, it was new for many of us, and for many of them. And so, I had to really, as I was like, I want to talk about these issues more. How can I talk about these issues more and feel integrity? Because my business itself seems to have been a place that uplifted whiteness. And I didn't even realize it. And so I took a break. I took a sabbatical at the end of the year, around December time. I took a month off. And I spent nearly every day of that month at the library immersing myself in Black literature. Just poetry and, nonfiction books, fiction books, like everything. I just wanted to soak in Blackness. And I was like, I need to find my answers. Like, I need to soak myself in this and then figure out what I want to do. And at the end of that time, I realized I need to shift the way that I'm doing business to specifically center Black, Indigenous people of color, because it's not enough that I'm Black. Right? It's not enough that I'm Black. We're operating in predominantly white spaces. And so if I don't say, this is who I'm intentionally uplifting, what's going to happen is whiteness is what gets uplifted.
Yep.
Right? And so,
around that same time, I was like, I am working with these people. This is who I'm catering to. If you don't like it, that's fine. But understand, like, you can learn from this, but understand this is not for you. This is not for you.
Right. Yeah, and I've been the same in being very clear. And, in that time, I've also, since then, I have expanded kind of my capacity to be able to do both now. So at that time, I was still coaching, I was still running that group, everything. I shut everything down and was like, I am ready to dedicate myself to being a writer and that being what I do. And so I said, white people, you can be there, you can listen, you can support my work, but know that I'm uplifting Black, Indigenous people of color. This is why I'm doing what I do. And so now I've got this book that I'm writing, and it's actually specifically to white women. And so it's like, I'm actually holding both now, but I do it with the understanding that the book is educating white people so that I can uplift Black, Indigenous people of color, so that they will treat Black, Indigenous people of color better. I'm not doing it because I feel like I need to save white people, or because, it is because I need you to understand so that you'll treat us better.
Yes.
Right. And and know that anytime I'm doing my work, I'm choosing to intentionally center us. So don't come into my spaces and derail the conversation. Don't come into my spaces and tone police people of color. Don't come into my spaces and demand free emotional labor. Don't come into my spaces and think that I owe you something. You know, I'm writing this book because I want to write this book, not because you need me to write the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has been that journey of like getting to that place has been very much about my own personal healing. Because I went from feeling unsafe to feeling like I need to like get rid of whiteness completely, right? because they're who's making me unsafe, so I need to get rid of them.
Yeah.
Right.
I know that feeling.
Right. And then coming to a place of, okay, this awakening has opened my own wounds and I need to work on those. And in working on those and in learning how to nourish and center myself and elevate myself as a Black woman, as a Muslim woman, is like really filling myself up. I now have a greater capacity to be able to hold both.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you got into that because with your book, because when I read about it, when I first saw it, I was a little confused because I was like, wait, I thought she shifted directions and it seems like she's shifted back. Now I'm understanding that this is it's not even really about helping white people. I'm putting this out so that you will treat us better so that we can be uplifted as well. And I think that's amazing and that you were able to kind of make that shift and still do it in a way that is uplifting the people that you want to. And all of this came from anger.
Right.
Like, all of this started with anger.
Right.
And that's what makes our anger so powerful. So I want to talk about the angry Black woman trope. And not that there's necessarily like the angry Black man, but like not the same way as the angry Black women, but I almost feel like the angry Black man is like seen as like the dangerous Black man. Okay.
Oh yeah.
How both of these are white supremacy and racism's and patriarchy's way of invalidating us. Because we have a right to be angry. We have a right to be angry as Black women, as Black men, as Black trans people, as non-binary. We have, as Black people, we have a right to be angry, and people of color as well. But specifically, as we are Black, and there is that particular
anti-Blackness.
Yes, that particular anti-Blackness for Black women and men is the angry Black woman. So whenever we're angry, or even when we're not angry, even if we're just passionate, like I've been passionate about things, so like, oh, why do you have to be so angry? I'm like, I was not angry at all. This is not anger. This is education. You should take that with some gratitude.
Yeah.
If you want to see me angry, I can show you angry. I've had those moments, but it's like, even if I was angry, I have every right to be angry. And I don't need to cater my anger or silence my anger or quiet my anger because it makes it more comfortable for you. And this is how we get invalidated, like Black women. It's like they say, oh, well, she's just an angry Black woman, as if what we're saying does not have any validity because I'm angry when I say it. I have a right to be angry. I live in this racist fucking world. And for men in a different way, I feel like they get invalidated. And I'm speaking about this from the perspective of a Black woman looking out, not knowing what it's like as a Black man. But I feel like Black men get invalidated in terms of like, oh, well, he's angry. He's just dangerous. He's an animal. And they're there to humanize and not seen as people who have real feelings and real views and real thoughts, but as a danger. Oh, watch out for this animal. And both ways are ways of invalidating us and dehumanizing us.
And notice that, and I just had this aha moment when you were talking, actually, which never occurred to me, but notice how both of those, the angry Black woman, the angry Black men, are specifically positioned as threats to white women.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that. I am so glad you said that.
Yeah. So it's like the white patriarchy has used the threat of the angry Black man to use the threat to white women. White women, be wary of the angry black man. He is an animal. He will rape you. He will assault you. He will, right?
He will come and attack you. He will take your innocence. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. And then the angry black woman is positioned as this also animal, but in this kind of female way, where it's like the minute we show even a little bit of passion, white women fall apart. They cry.
Yes.
They unfold, and their white knights come to the rescue to, you know, swoop in and rescue them. And so it's like both ways are used to, but like both tropes are used to scare white women. And then, well, we have to protect our white women.
Yes, I was just going to say that. We have to protect our, like, white women are seen as like the people in society that need to be protected, and let's care for them and let's shield them.
And that goes back to, from my understanding, that goes back to the position of white women during the times of colonialism, where they were like children. They were treated like children. Right? They were not allowed to work. Their only duties were around the house. They couldn't have a say in anything. And so it's like, white women, you were being infantilized. You were being treated as children. When you play into this trope of the angry black woman or the angry black man today, you're allowing yourself to be used in that same way as a child. It's like, be a grown woman. There's nothing inherently scary about a black man or a black woman.
Mm-hmm. That's just conditioning. It's
just conditioning, right? It's just conditioning. But here's the thing, we internalize it about ourselves.
Yes, we absolutely do. And that's one of the ways that we silence ourselves, which I want to dive into. But in what you were talking about, in the way that white women were sort of positioned in, I want to say slavery because I'm in America, as like to be taken care of, and they weren't allowed to do anything. What they did have was power over black people.
Yes.
They had power over the slaves. They told the women what to do. They raped the men as well.
Right.
And so
they were a nightmare because they had nothing else to do. That was it. They were on top of them all the time.
Yes. And that was the way that they could exert their power. And they're doing the same thing when they play into that trope is, oh, poor me, this black woman has hurt my emotional feelings. Right. And that's a way to try and gain power over black women. Oh, I'm so scared of this black man. Please come save me. That's a way of taking power over, trying to exert power over the black man. And it's in both ways, this like, being a child, but also let me exert power where I have it.
Also being an abuser, right? Yes. Also terrorizing black people. Yes.
And so because whiteness is what's in power in society, we, like you said, have internalized this as well in the way we silence ourselves, the way I, as a younger person, or even in relationships, was like, oh, I'm not allowed to be angry, because as soon as I get angry, this person's going to like shut down and just be like, oh, well, you're just being pissy, you're being dramatic. And that was obviously not a healthy relationship. But maybe if I had been in touch with my anger, I would have gotten out of it sooner.
Right.
So, so this is,
because
like my brain's like, oh, it's too much.
But I love what you said about you being younger, because we were not aware of the truth, right? And so we're conditioned growing up into a society where these are the implicit understandings about how things are. And even if no one ever said it to us, we always knew that we were a threat. And so we have learned to tamp ourselves down and to make ourselves small. And anytime that anger does come to the surface, we're afraid of it, because we know we don't live in places and we don't operate in spaces where that anger will be understood for what it actually is. It will be turned into something else completely. Mm-hmm. So we don't feel safe to express it, because we know what could happen on the other side of us expressing it. And a huge part of my healing around that, again, has been surrounding myself with other people of color, who are on that journey as well. Because it's like, I'm not alone. I'm not isolated in this. I can go and vent in safe spaces where it's like, oh my God, this happened to me, da 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 da. And it's like, yes, I know something similar happened to me too. And we can talk about it in spaces that are healthy. That's why it's so important, the kind of work that you're doing, where you're specifically serving us, right? Because we need those spaces where we can show up and fully be ourselves. It's so rare in the online business world to find spaces like that.
And that's exactly why I do what I do. And it reminds me, at the end of last year in November, I was going to open a group program and I had to put it on pause, and I opened it this spring. But I had made a video expressing, why this was for women of color, why it was specifically for women of color, and only for women of color. And I didn't
just
get
underline that.
Like, this is a space for you to come in and be expressed, right, and be seen and be heard in your experiences as a woman of color. And I didn't really get too much pushback on that, but somebody had come into the comments on that video and was like, well, why are you only, and it was actually a man, he was like, why is it only women of color? Like, doesn't this create, I don't know what he said, something about, doesn't this create more division,
create a racial divide, right?
Yeah. And he was like, it's still kind of, he didn't say racist, I don't think he said racist, but he was basically like, this is
divisive, probably
is still bias and discrimination. And it wasn't even me. I somebody else came back and responded before I even got to it. And she's a white woman, and she was like, actually, it's really important that women of color and that Black women have their own spaces, because it's not safe for them in spaces with white people. And personally, I think it's really commendable that she's creating this space. I was like,
yes.
I was like, I'm so glad I know the right people. I went into a little bit of back and forth, and he was just like, okay, he's like, I get what you mean, I just disagree. I was like, that's fine, because this isn't for you.
That's literally fine, because this has nothing to do with you.
Yeah. And he was polite. Like, he was actually polite. He was just like, I don't really get it. And he's like, I don't know, I don't agree. I think this is still causing separation. And I was like, that's fine. I'm like, but this isn't for you, so it doesn't really matter. But it was nice to have somebody else come in and be like, actually, this is why this is necessary. But it's not safe. And that's challenging for us, because we are constantly not only in a world that is white dominated, where white has the power and white has the privilege, but in smaller spaces, pockets, in person and online, these spaces are often white dominated as well, unless you specifically seek out places for people of color, which is excellent to do. That's why I'm trying to create these spaces and create my business around this. But it is challenging going into those spaces where they're white dominated, knowing that you might bring up something and you have no idea how much violence you're going to get in return. You have no idea who's going to come along and invalidate you, who's going to tell you like, oh, well, maybe if you said it nicely, then people, maybe you should say it this way. And it's like, I actually don't have to cater how I say it to make you comfortable. Like, I should be able to just express, because you are the one who's abusing me. And so it is really challenging. And to know that when we have that anger and we express that anger, that it's going to be, often we're going to be met with this pushback and this backlash and this reverse anger. You want to talk about reverse racism, reverse anger. I'm mad that you're angry. Okay. Stay mad about it.
I think a lot of white women also are not comfortable with their own anger. They haven't had they also have a wound around that, right? And because of patriarchy, right? And so they have that, and they're seeing us expressing our anger unapologetically and fiercely, and they feel triggered in their own inability to be with anger. And also they know it's justified, and they know that they're complicit, and they know that we're talking about things that they have done, or people that they love, or people that they respect, and they don't know how to be with that. And so the response is just like, just stop, stop saying that.
Oh,
stop
you're
saying
hurting me. You're hurting
right.
me. Ah, yes.
Right. And so, it's just like, I'm just laughing because I'm not on Facebook anymore, but I remember coming to a point where, I used to like argue back and forth.
Me too.
Right. And then I came to a point where I realized, this is like really like draining my energy. And actually, I don't owe these people an explanation, especially if they're a stranger to me, or I don't have a close relationship with them, or I don't see them doing their work around anti-racism. Like, why am I spending all of this labor? And so I ended up just in the end, just giving like one-word answers. If they would say something that was tone policing or racist, I would just say, no, or stop, or, leave. And they just didn't know what to do with that either, because it was like, oh, this is like not like ranty anger, like rah, 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 but it's like cold, no, cold,
yes.
stop kind of anger. And that is also uncomfortable for them as well, because they are so used to our boundaries just being open and them just being able to demand things from us. Right. And I realized how powerful it is for us to like, just without explanation, say no, or say stop, or say leave this space, and not have to keep following up. And if they don't, then they get booted out, or they have to leave, or walk away, or whatever. They didn't know how to deal. That was like worse, I think, for many of them than the
you're shutting me down. I'm not allowed to speak.
Right.
Nope.
Yes. You're censoring me. I heard many times.
Yes.
You're censoring me.
Yes, you're censoring me. And I watched in the beginning of the year when you came back from your break, I watched how you started responding to some of these people, or like in your posts, and be like, just so you know, this was not an invitation to argue. So
right. So you can leave.
Stop now. If you don't like it, you can leave. This post is to center people of color. And I was like, oh, here we go. I'm like, so this, but I learned a little bit from you about like how to respond that keeps me in a position of like, I am in control of my space, and no, you do not get to invalidate the people that I'm here to stand for. And I used to argue too, and I'm like, that would make me not want to speak out, because I'm like, I don't want to have to argue. And it's like, actually, I really don't have to argue.
No,
I can tell people,
you
like,
just say what you want to say.
Yeah,
and then if they want to have feelings about it. I often say things like, you can have discussions around, this is fine. You don't agree with me, or you want to have a discussion around, just don't do it in my space. This is not an invitation to do it here. Take this discussion into your space. Go open up that conversation in your space. Go hold space for that conversation in your space. Go ahead, have at it. You're not going to do it here.
Just not here. Yes. Yeah. And I've done where like I'll respond once to like maybe explain a little bit, try not to take too long with it because my time is valuable. Then oftentimes I'll end with, please go do your research and anti-racism education, and don't respond here until you do. If you respond again, you will be blocked. Like just right from the beginning, just be like, this is not welcome. Respond again, you will be blocked. And that's really helped to lighten things up for me.
Right, because you can just like
my anger, and it doesn't matter. Like if you have a problem with it, that means that you need to go do your education, and I will give you that call to action, and then you need to not come back over here because this is not an appropriate space.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's that evolution of, like I was saying right at the beginning, we were taught to fear our anger, and then we wake up and we start expressing our anger, but it's out of control, right? It's just like at everyone all the time, and it's like a fire that never stops burning until it starts to burn you out, and then you realize, I have to shift the way that I am using this energy, because I don't want to be sacrificed. I will not, like, I often say, I will not sacrifice myself at the altar of whiteness just for you to get it, just for white people to get it, for me to have to get this angry and to keep burning this fire inside of me. Like, I'm not going to do that. For me, anger is a spark. It's a human response. It's part of our range of human emotions, but it's not the place where I begin and end.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to play into that it just angry all the time, we're playing into that stereotype. We're reducing ourselves down to the angry Black woman. It's like, yeah, I have anger. I also have pleasure, love, excitement, enthusiasm, sadness, grief. All. I have a full range. I'm so multi-layered. And the anger is there as just a normal part of being a human being, right? It's that going back to anger is an appropriate response to racism, because racism is a form of violence and abuse. So if you're not angry, what's wrong with your emotions?
Yeah, exactly. Why aren't you angry?
Right?
What's happening?
What's
Do we need to call someone? Do we need to talk about it? Like,
right. So if you don't feel that tells me something. You've shut a part of yourself down.
Yes,
that you can't feel that.
And this is so important. You said anger is a spark, and I feel like there's kind of two things you're talking about in terms of like, it is okay for us to feel anger. We should feel anger, but not to let that anger be the only thing we feel, and not to let it burn us out. And so using that in appropriate ways of expressing, like you have your book that you are writing, and I have found ways of bringing my anger into my work as well. Not only in my business and working with people of color, but in my actual writing. And I realized in the last few months that like, I have not allowed myself to express anger in certain ways, or about certain things. It's like, I feel like, oh, well, if I'm angry, it's still affecting me. And I'm like, I don't want it to still be affecting me. So I'm going to pretend that I'm not angry. And so I realized this a couple of months ago. And in realizing that, I'm writing a science fiction novel, which is a play on our race dynamics in this country, in the United States, I should say, in a science fiction context. So, in that, and in looking at that, I was like, my main character is not angry enough. I'm like, her anger needs to become an integral part of.
We need to turn up the volume.
Yeah, I need to turn this up, because I was trying to turn it down on myself.
Right.
And about like certain things that I was processing at the time about a past relationship with my sort of last-ish relationship. And I'm like, this is showing up in my writing. Like, this is showing up in my writing, this like lack of anger, or this trying to silence the anger. I'm like, I not only need to experience this and express this myself, but my main character needs to express this. And so now it's becoming a spark for me to bring that through in my writing and in my character, and bring her even more to life, because she should be angry. She's dealing with racism all the time. She's dealing with all kinds of violence. She's dealing with being invalidated and dehumanized in this mission to bring peace and to save her people. And that needs to come through. Like, she should be angry about the way they're being treated. She should be angry that they're taking their rights away. And so it's become this way for me to express my anger about what's happening in society, and put it in my writing, in my fiction, so that it can not only come through me, but so that when this book is released, it can go out and be shared with the world. And people are going to read that. People of color are going to read that and be like, oh, yes, that's how I feel.
Right.
They're gonna understand, because it is coming. It is an expression of what we have to deal with as well.
Yeah, because I find that actually sharing anger can be very healing. Right? Because it's like, oh, finally. And this is what I found when I published that article. I got so many messages from women of color saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, because this is how I've been feeling for years. And I haven't felt like I can say it, because I know what will happen if I do.
Yes.
And so there was a catharsis for many women of color from reading that and saying, finally, someone told them. Right? And so that's how I feel like your book will be. It's like, I'm thinking of Octavia Butler, and I know you and I have talked about this before.
I almost mentioned her earlier. I was like, think Octavia Butler.
We love her.
Bringing it into a different context, which is what she does. She took what was happening and race dynamics and put it in a science fiction context.
Yes, I just finished reading Kindred, and that was a gut-wrenching read. And I finished it and was like, what do I even do with my life right now?
Yeah.
Because wow, just wow.
Yeah, that's the only one I haven't read because it's the last novel of hers that I haven't read. And I'm like, I mentioned to you before, I'm like, it's going to be the last time I can read one of her books for the first time because she's dead and I'm not ready.
No,
I'm holding out
this
just
book
a little longer.
It's heavy, and you know, I had only read the Parable series, and then I read this one, which is actually very different to the Parable series. And now I've ordered Lilith's Brood.
Oh,
so I'm waiting for that to come through.
That one's good, and the Parable series I think was the first one that I read. No, the Flesh one was the first book I read. The Patternist series was the first bundle of hers that I read.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm like, I don't want them to finish, but I also want to read all of them now. You know?
Let me devour these books. Yes, they're so good.
But going back to, I mean, say for example, the Parable series, there was a lot of pain in that series, right? And a lot of abuse, enslavement of people, just horrible. And yet, the protagonist, Lauren Olamina, she was just focused on this vision of how she could change things, how she could plant these seeds so that something better could come. And this is what I love, what I feel strongly about Black women, is that we are alchemists. You know, and I often think about Beyonce's Lemonade album and how she took what had happened, all the pain, all the trauma, all the, you know, everything, all the grief, all the anger, and was like, I am going to channel this into something that is really beautiful. It's beautiful in the sense of like, it's magnificent, but it's like anger fully embodied. Like some of the videos, especially the, what's that video where she's like in the parking lot and she's just going off?
Yes. Oh my God.
That's my favorite
I know
song.
exactly what you're talking about, but I can't remember. Yes. I'm not good with titles sometimes, remembering titles and names of things.
The one that's the collaboration with Jack White? And she's just like, I'd never seen Beyonce like that, you know? It was like,
it's like, whoa. If Beyonce can get angry, I can get angry.
Right. And I love that song. It's so funny because like my husband never cheated on me, but every time I listen to that, it's like all the anger I feel about other things. It's like I can express it. But she took all of that crap and she turned it into something magnificent and actually ultimately healing for people. Yes. And so that's why my book is called From Anger with Love, because it's always going to be both and. I'm not going to say, oh, you know, I was angry about it, but now I'm over it. And now I'm just going to focus on the love part and the, you know, because what? No, racism
I was going to say,
life,
what?
Yeah. But that's what whiteness wants us to do, is to get over it.
Yes,
you know, okay, it's bad what's happening, whatever, but you're not going to get people to join your cause if you're just angry. You're not going to get people to help and want to do the work if you're being so angry all the time. And it's like, listen, if you don't understand that this anger, actually the root of this anger is love, because I love humanity, because I love Black people.
Yes.
Right? When we're angry about young Black boys being killed, when we're angry about the Muslim ban, when we're angry about it, wherever in the world, whatever's going on, when there is abuse, when there is any kind of oppression, the anger, the root of it is that I'm angry because I love humanity and this shouldn't be happening to anybody.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And so it's like, why are you not feeling anything though?
Yes. Yes. And I'm so glad that you said that, because I actually had that written down as like, oh, I want to touch on this, because I made a video about this. I think it was months ago. It wasn't a video. It was a live stream. I did a live stream on YouTube about this, about the ways that people try to quiet our anger, in particular as Black people, is like, they don't understand that our anger comes from love. That we are angry because we love ourselves, because we love our people, and because we are seeing the atrocities that are happening to us, and we're angry about it. We're in pain about it, and we want change about it. And that to try and quiet our anger, for other people to tell us that we're not allowed to be angry, we're not allowed to express that anger, is a way of also stifling our love. It's a way of trying to control and limit the amount of love that we're allowed to express, show for other people. Because when I'm angry and I'm showing that I'm angry, there are other Black women and Black men and Black non-conforming people who are seeing that and being like, yes, she cares about me. Yes, she's doing this. I understand what she's saying. That's someone who cares, because they can see it in my anger.
Right.
And the
it's
less
true.
And when you don't see people being angry about it, you're like, why don't you care?
You don't care, right?
Why don't you care? What's
feels.
wrong with you? Yeah. Why don't you care? And so when we get to express that anger, that is part of us expressing love. And that is a powerful thing that should never be shut down.
No.
And it needs to
because
be when they more and come through in more of our work and more of the ways that we show up in the world.
Right. Because when they try to tell us not to feel that anger, they're trying to make us numb the way that they are numb.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, just numb out. Don't feel it. It's like, no, I don't want to. Because if I do that, then my humanity dies.
Yes.
Right? I was just also thinking as you were speaking about how it's like been on my mind a lot. I guess it's the same from when I wrote that initial letter. It's the same thing. Is this anger that I feel when I see white people only sharing about racism when it benefits them in some way.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This good topic. Good thing to talk about. Yes. I'm like, or like people who are like, oh, now you're trying to hop on the bandwagon. You didn't care about racism before.
Right. And the way that we can see that that's what it is and it's not actually caring is because it's all about, it's a brand positioning thing. It's all about what other people, like hopping on the bandwagon, maybe sharing what other people have been writing instead of actually tuning inwards and actually like getting real about your own complicity in this. It's just reposting what someone else wrote. It's just sharing what someone else has said, but not actually like digging deep within and you doing your own work, right? Them doing their own work and saying, hey, you know what? Like, these are the ways that I have been complicit. These are the ways that I have been taking part in oppression. And I want to publicly own up to that, right? I want to publicly be an example of what it looks like to do the work, right? Doing the work isn't just, oh yeah, this person posted this, so I'm going to repost it. That's not doing the work.
Yeah. And doing the work is not just looking up things that are going on. It's good to be informed, but it's not just looking at what's going on outside. You need to look at what's going on inside.
Right.
What's going on with you? Right. How have you perpetuated these things? How have you benefited from these things?
Right.
And having a willingness to be like, actually, I don't want to benefit from these things anymore. I want to help break it down.
Right. Right. And so I love that you use the word benefit as well there, because a lot of times I have seen that, especially the more successful that white person's platform is, that they will not really risk anything. You know, it will be like, I'm going to share this other thing, but I don't want to risk my audience. I don't want to risk having to dismantle things that I have been doing. I don't want to risk losing money by getting really, really real, like all the way real. And yet at the same time, they look at Black women like ourselves and they're like, wow, I love you because you're so honest, you're so real, you're so transparent, you're so this, it's like, you be that then.
Yeah. That's not, step up, do it too.
Step up. That's not specific to being a Black person. You know, that's not, you can do that. You just choose not to. And so that makes me angry because I cannot, and maybe it's like the Sagittarius, right? The Sagittarius sun, but I just cannot be with hypocrisy. I can't be with it in myself, and I can't be with it, be in spaces where it's happening and either not say anything or not walk away. Right. And so for me, like, there's so much hypocrisy going on where people are saying they're about the work, but when you really just peek behind the cover a little bit, nothing's changed.
Exactly.
Right. Nothing is actually changing. And it's like, And you don't want me to be angry about that? That you're actually just hopping on this wave that you see happening right now, to actually just further benefit yourself? Like,
yes,
yeah,
I was just going to say that.
yeah.
I'm like, they were benefiting from it in the first place, and now they're sort of hopping on the bandwagon so they can benefit from
some more
the anti-racism movement that they're not actually a part of.
And it's that positionality. Like, let me position myself within this movement. Let me position myself along Black people. Let me position myself by using the right words, but just enough so I don't really like have to risk anything.
Yeah. Just enough to say that I take a stand, but I'm not actually calling out anybody. I'm
right.
not actually like calling out myself. I'm not actually giving a call to action to my followers to check themselves. I'm not actually really taking a stand for anything. I'm just making it look good.
Right.
We get to be mad about that.
I'm mad about that. I will continue to be mad about that because it's rampant. And because, again, we have both come up in this industry that is very white dominated. When I first started, I don't know when you first started, but when I first started, it was like the people that you're supposed to aspire to become were all white.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Except for Oprah, who's like above all those people anyway. Right?
Yes. I'm trying to think. I'm like pretty much, yes, all white. And all like the spiritual leaders, a lot of the spiritual leaders, or like personal development or personal transformation leaders are all white people who are not talking about racism at all.
Right. So they're talking about world transformation. They're talking about changing the world, changing people's lives. But it's like, what part of people's lives? Because you're not getting into the real issues here.
And it's more than just the individual. We are individuals who are living in a greater society that, not that we can't break out of it, but a greater society that it is affecting and impacting what we can do and how hard we have to work to do it.
Right. Yeah. And so as I began waking up more and more, I was like, wow, it's actually really unsafe for a lot of Black people and people of color to have white coaches, because most of them that I knew at the time were not doing their work. No. So how can they fully be of service to the wholeness of you, the full spectrum of you, if this part of your really important part of your identity, they can't see it, or they choose not to see it, or they choose not to do the work? Like, how are they going to be in full support to you? What I saw is that rather than being able to support them, they were able to traumatize them more, because it's like, if you show up with your anger as a Black woman, as a Black person, it's like, well, we create the reality that we want by the quality of our thoughts. Right?
It's like law of attraction. You create your reality. Everything is part of your spiritual journey or whatever. But you shouldn't be angry about it.
Right. And so it's like, how can you speak to my experience when you don't live that life? How can you support me? You can't support me.
Yes, you can't even really guide me through the way I need to be guided through, because a lot of times there is that dismissal of our actual experiences, and this like, well, if you're just going to be angry, you're just going to attract more of this same thing. It's like, but I'm living this thing, because that's the world that I live in.
Exactly. Yeah. So if white people, white coaches, teachers, healers want to be of real service, like this is this is non-negotiable work. You have to be able to do this work. Otherwise, you're just able to serve white people, and hello, that's white supremacy. You just continue to uphold the system.
Yes, I actually there was a coach who had offered like a couple of sessions. I guess it's kind of how she does her intro with people, and she was white, and she's from Australia, I think, and I was kind of like, I don't know, we'll see how this goes. Let's see if I get any kind of like dismissiveness of what I'm working on and what I'm doing. Because I've had other coaches who were like, oh, well, like you're only working with people of color and you're leaving out a lot of people. And I'm like, nobody says that about people who coach.
You're leaving, right. You're leaving a lot of money on the table.
You're coaching, you're only coaching women. You should coach women and men in your women's like nobody says that. I'm like, so why is it that why like question that, coach? Is like, why do you give pushback when somebody is only working with people of color, when you don't do it when they're only working with women or only working with men? Because there are different intersectionalities that need to be dealt with and need to be nurtured. And that's what I do. And so I wasn't sure if there was going to be any kind of pushback. And the sessions went okay. It didn't feel like the right fit for me. And I also am very like adamant about supporting people of color. And so if I were to hire a coach, I would want to work with a coach of color. But I posted something on my Facebook about, it was the video you shared on Instagram. Actually, I shared it to Facebook about how we don't actually, it was actually a message to white people about how we don't actually have to be polite when we tell you about how you're abusing us.
We don't. The video that I recorded.
It's the one that I recorded that you had shared.
Yes.
Grammed it on Instagram. Like, we don't actually owe you politeness. We don't owe you gratitude. We don't have to cater to you and babysit you through your feelings of discomfort when you have abused us and caused us harm. And that's like telling someone who has been regularly sexually assaulted, who gets sexually assaulted again, that, that's like telling that person telling them, well, maybe if you were nicer to me, if you said it nicer, I wouldn't sexually abuse you.
Right.
Like, that makes, it's the same thing. And so she came onto that post and immediately dismissed what I was saying. And I was like, this is why I don't work with white coaches. like that wasn't my response. But she was like, I have a lot of respect for you, but I disagree with you. I was really, people were really nice to me when I was like out in the world and discovering things and didn't realize that I was saying something ignorant. And that really helped me. And I'm like, it's not about you, boo.
It's not
about you, boo. It's not about it. I'm like, this is your problem. You're prioritizing you being comfortable and how someone dresses you than you are over the actual harm that you caused with the words that you said. 100%. I'm like, that's a problem. And she like didn't get it. And then somebody else came on and he was like, he's like, I used to do the same thing, because he was a white man. He's like, I used to do the same thing. So I get what you're talking about. He's like, but your problem here is that you are more worried about the way someone is expressing
you they are abusing them
than you are about what caused the hurt in the first place. Like, you need to be worried more about what caused the hurt, and then you can address maybe how they brought it up to you. But like, that happened, and I was just like, I'm like, girl, this is exactly why I wouldn't work with you. Like,
and it's so weird to me that she would come on to that having had some sessions with you. Like, she could just move on. She didn't have to say anything.
Yeah, she didn't have to say anything. And I'm like, you literally
she could feel her feelings.
What I said in the post, like exactly what I was talking about, you just did. Did you? I'm like, did you watch the video? Did you? So but this is a problem. It's like, this is why there need to be more people like us out there who are able to hold that space for people of color who need that transformational work, who need that help from someone who gets it. Who can hold space for the anger and isn't going to spiritually bypass it. And allow them to show up.
Because, the initial, like, when you did that video and you were channeling that anger and you were speaking that truth to power, like, you had to feel those feelings then when you did it, right? But then you have these people like herself come on, and then it's like, now I'm more angry actually because of what you said. Like, I thought it was okay, but now you've just made me more mad because you're just not getting it, and you're doing the exact thing that I said in the video. You're doing it.
And then after my first message, it's interesting because after my first message, she backtracked and she was like, oh, I was just saying that this was my experience. I'm like, no, literally what you said was, I disagree because this is what helped me. I'm like, you centered yourself and then you used your experience to dismiss what I was saying and invalidate it. I'm like, that is harm against people of color. Please go do your own anti-racism education before you comment again.
And you know what really strikes me as well? I know that I know that white people are often like scared to engage in these conversations because they know that they'll get that kind of pushback, right? But actually that pushback, what you've just said, is actually you teaching her and people like her how to be compassionate, how to have empathy. It's a gift. It's a real gift because you're saying to her, look, I'm teaching you how to be, when someone is hurting, when someone has said they've been hurt, when someone has said they've been abused, that's not the way to act.
Yes, exactly.
Right? So I'm teaching you how to be a human being here.
Yes. You're a coach, like, connect with your humanity here. Like, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back.
that's what bothers me again around, and this is why I address spiritual white women so much, because I'm like, you spout these things all the time. You teach them, you preach them, you talk about compassion, you talk about empathy, you talk about holding space, you talk about all these things. And yet in these moments, it's like you forget, you get amnesia, or somehow it doesn't apply to Black people. It doesn't apply to people of color. Why? Why doesn't it apply? Why do you only act like that when you're speaking to white people? You don't speak like that, and they're talking about their pain, but when we're talking about our pain, it's different somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so again, it's like that, going back to that anti-Blackness, it's like that is so ingrained in not only white people, but everyone, but it's so ingrained in white people that they've been conditioned to not fully see us as full human beings.
Yes.
That are worthy of the same level of compassion and empathy and respect and all of those things. It's like, that's why she felt the need to just come in like trundle. I'm always like amazed at people that I don't even know. Why are you coming into this space and just like, me, this is what I think, this is how I feel, this is what I want you to tell me. It's like, would you act like this if we were in person? Do you know what I mean? Like, why are you acting like this? So sorry to just go off on one there, but
a lot of times they wouldn't. They would just be like, oh, I'm just going to be quiet because now this person's here and they can actually get in my face. I'm just going to be quiet when I'm not hiding behind a computer screen.
Right. But it's that audacity and that like boldness to just come into our spaces, just pour like poison around and then just walk out. And it's like, oh, thanks, thanks for the toxicity. Thanks.
Appreciate that. That was so awesome. You're so giving.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been such a great conversation. In conclusion, I want to say it's okay for us to feel anger and to express anger and to use that anger, put it into whatever your work is. Let it fuel you. Let it be that spark in you.
Yeah.
Let it create change in the world.
Yes. And know that you're not just that, right? It's like both, and it's like, and that's the thing about being a human being. We're not binary. We're not just one thing. Like I know how to fully own that. And I'm a really loving person as well. Mm-hmm. And I know how to hold both. And it's the world out there that's told us you have to be one thing. But if we get to the truth and we're doing our own individual, because we have our work to do as well, right?
Oh, absolutely.
As people of color, we have our own internalized oppression. We have our own conditioning. We have our own wounding. Mm-hmm. We need to really work on healing that so that when that gets thrown at us, when those stereotypes get thrown at us, it doesn't knock us in the same way. It's like, oh my gosh, they call me an angry Black woman. Yeah, I'm angry. Yes, I am. I'm also loving. I'm also joyful. I'm also all these other things. And you can't reduce me down to this one thing because you don't know how to be with me or with yourself. Yeah. But yeah, anger is a powerful ally. It is powerful medicine for the world. Think of every great writer, every great feminist writer, every great civil rights activist. Where would they be without that anger? What would they have accomplished without that anger? Right? Everyone's like, I love Audre Lorde, I love James Baldwin, I love it. They were mad.
Yeah, they were hella mad. They were angry people, and they used that. They used that to bring truth. Yeah. They used that that was part of their power.
Yeah. And
that's part of our power as well. Our power as people of color, as Black people, as any whatever intersection you are in that is marginalized, that is part of our power.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So where can people find you?
You can, I'm going through a transition at the moment, but you can find me on my website, wildmysticwoman.com. You can also find me on Instagram, which is the only social media platform I am on. The handle is @wildmysticwoman. I'm going to be jumping onto IGTV soon as well, and starting to do some videos on there. And you can also find me on patreon.com as well. So patreon.com/Layla Saad. If you get value from my work and you want to be able to support me in a sustainable way, in a way that's affordable to you, then yeah, that's where you can find me. But for the most part this year, it's like fully focused on getting this book out into the world. And then who knows where we'll go from there.
Yes, I'm so excited. Yes, I will have those links in the show notes, both on YouTube, and if you are listening to the audio version, it will be in the show notes there as well. Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a powerful conversation. And oh my gosh, I'm like buzzing with it. So.
I had like several aha moments in this conversation. So thank you very much.
I did as well. So thank you so much. And yeah, we will part for now, but I'm sure we will cross paths again. Thank you so much for joining us for this powerful conversation. And just remember that your anger as a Black person or as a person of color is part of your power. You get to express it and you get to use it to ignite that fire within you. You can use it to create and to create change in the world. Before you go, head on over to kristeniris.com/unblock to get my free video and workbook guide, Unblock Your Dream Life. This is about unblocking all aspects of your dream life, including where you might be holding on to your anger and not expressing it. This will help you to unearth some of the stories that you may have around your anger and about your expression of anger so that you can clear that out of the way and let your voice be heard. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Melanated Rising. If so, please do me a favor and leave an honest review on iTunes. It is the best way to help others find this show and get it out to more ears so more melanated creatives can rise. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Melanated Rising. Until next time, stand in your power, stand in your color, and stand for what you create.